All right, welcome back, everybody. Right now it's time for the Executive Edge. I spoke to Microsoft founder Bill Gates and former Treasury Secretary Hank Paulson yesterday at a virtual event for the Economic Club of New York that focused on the environment and climate change. They are both optimistic about what they think they can do towards climate change, but they did say that this is an incredibly difficult problem to try and tackle. Bill Gates addressed the grid here in the United States and the regulatory challenges that are slowing the pace of innovation.
So there's days when I see the innovation, the pace of innovation, I feel, wow, we can do this. Then there's days when you look at like how easy it is to get transmission permitted in the US and how that's just a conundrum that we don't have a clear plan for. So every day there's data points that make me optimistic and some that make me go, wow. Most of these projects, even when they make sense economically, they fail to get all the approvals. For example, there's a controversy in New England now about bringing down hydropower from Canada that would reduce emissions. And so the natural gas industry is in there lobbying against it and, getting people who say, anything that disturbs anything is we just shouldn't allow it. And so the amount, when you model out what the electric grid for North America looks like when it's providing a huge additional amount of electricity because that's replacing natural gas and gasoline, you have to see unbelievable transmission, say from the Midwest out to the East Coast to bring all that wind and solar into where the energy is needed. And even if we go at full speed without these permitting problems, it's going to be super hard. There's a goal of a clean grid by 2035. Well, you'd have to be building literally hundreds of high voltage lines today to achieve that. And so this model that is this open source thing that people will play with, that's there to try to get us to go, wow, we don't have a plan. And transmission permitting is a block to getting that to move forward. And the U.S. is not the only place that finds that a challenging problem.
Joe, it's kind of what you were talking about with yesterday with Jennifer Granholm, some of these issues that even if you were to do these things would be a very difficult stumbling block. It kind of goes back to what you've been saying about that. I
was listening closely, and I kind of got irritated because he said he blamed it on the hydrocarbon industry. The natural gas industry is pushing back. There's 45 different groups that don't want that to happen. Most of them environmental groups.
Most of them are natural, habitat ones too.
Natural gas
but it's also the problem of not in my backyard.
It's a strange bedfellows. The environmental groups as well as the natural gas company. But
he touched on that in another part, not in that soundbite you just heard, but he did touch on that in another part. That it doesn't matter what the NIMBY effect. There are going to be all kinds of people who don't want these things to happen. So it's not just federal regulation that you're up against; it's state regulation, it's local municipalities. But it is one of the big stumbling blocks. And like you said, you'd have to be building all of these things right now if you actually wanted to reach those goals that you've stated for 2035. Hank Paulson is now running a fund that's focused on climate solutions for TPG. And the former secretary, the former Treasury Secretary, talked about the interactions that he has right now on a daily basis with CEOs who are talking about lowering carbon emissions.
You've had 2,000 major companies, the CEOs have made net zero pledges. And so I started calling CEOs. I've been calling 3 or 4 CEOs every day now for a couple months. And there's been an amazing change because a few years ago, they always said climate was important, but it was some cases lip service. And what they were doing, a lot of it was delegated to sustainability officers. Now they see that markets are moving and that there's going to be massive change. And, when they look at, for instance, Tesla trading at 8 times the market value of General Motors, some of that may be a bubble, but this is also reminiscent reminiscent of what we saw, back in the days of cellular. The markets look to the future. So the market value went to the future, and the revenues may have been with yellow pages and landlines, but the markets moved. And so now what we see are that CEOs, see there's massive change coming as we're going to rewire society. And, so they're putting real dollars behind it, and they're driven by two factors. There's some companies that are driven by what they see as a tremendous opportunity. They're looking at this offensively as a way to make money.
It's interesting. He was talking about CEOs being opportunistic, not necessarily altruistic, although when I asked him about that, he did say, yeah, there's a lot of good feelings that come around this. But the reason that you still have CEOs talking about this is because they see opportunities. They see a chance to do this, or they're worried that they need to be really defensive and protect themselves from getting lost or getting left behind. And that's what's interesting, guys, is in the past, we've seen things like this be really talked about and really celebrated, but when a crisis comes along, they get dropped. That happened in 2008 with the financial crisis. People stopped talking about climate change, stopped focusing on it. What was surprising is that did not happen over the last year with the pandemic. You would think that people would be focused on other issues. They were both surprised by the idea that it really picked up steam, this movement during the last year with the pandemic, and didn't get shoved to the back burner.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.